I'll slide it over to Margaret McIntyre, town planner.
Hi, everybody. We are gathered here this afternoon to discuss the results of a study that we started in 2025. We got a grant through the Community Resiliency Partnership through MOCA, which we've talked about a lot. We really wanted to
Thanks for reminding me.
the grant we got was to map future flood risks in Harpswell. And the goal of this project was really to bring planning level detail to all residents and be able, for residents and property owners and community members to be able to plan for future resiliency on their own for their own private infrastructure. Harpswell's received a couple grants over the last few years to look at vulnerable town roads and map what sea level rise and future flood risk will look for some vulnerable town roads. We looked at, I think we did Lookout Point, we did Abner Point, we did Lowell's Cove Road, and then we did some kind of high-level engineering to look at what the hard solutions would be if we wanted to make those roads more resilient. And this project allows homeowners to see how future sea level rise will impact their properties and their infrastructure, and give them those details to make those resiliency planning measures on a local level. So we partnered with a company called Stantec. Scott Hayward is here from Stantec, and he's going to be presenting his findings of all the modeling that he's done. And then during the select board meeting at 5 o'clock, we have our Bowdoin Fellow Catcher, who's going to be presenting a story map to help explain the project.
Wow.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to dig up the other presentation I had too. Hold on one moment. I also need to join the Zoom call. So trying to get caught up here. Apologies.
Hey, no pressure.
Okay, good. I guess I'll give a general kind of introduction to the project. And then it might take me a minute to get on the Zoom call, but I will do that afterwards, and then I'll start presenting some slides and kind of discuss some of our findings, and then pull up the final product if I'm able to pull that up too. I know we have Catcher working on the online version of all the data, and I guess with my the version of the software I have on my computer, I can't pull up all the layers all at the same time. So hopefully if that's online and I can get that pulled up during this portion of the call, we can do that. But yeah, let me get Zoom set up.
So I guess I'll continue to explain while he gets set up. As a part of this study, we measured 3 different I think they're called storm intervals, and 3 different sea level rise scenarios. So we looked at the 100-year storm, which is the same thing that FEMA maps. So that would be a storm that's statistically supposed to hit once every 100 years. We also mapped the 50-year storm and the 10-year storm. And then for sea level rise scenarios, we did 0 feet of sea level rise, 4 feet, and 8 feet. So you can look, so we have 9 maps, and you can look at each sea level rise scenario with each storm scenario. So you know, at 4 feet of sea level rise, what will your property look like for a 10-year storm versus a 50-year storm versus the FEMA 100-year storm? Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think it's important to mention for everyone's, understanding that these are non-regulatory. These are planning tools that can help the town perhaps, go toward a regulatory, solution at some point. But at this juncture, it's not regulatory language.
So all the maps are going to be available in ArcGIS Online, which is where we have right now The only product that we have on our website is our shoreline zoning map. But what they've been working on is getting all that data pulled into ArcGIS Pro and then formatted to put in online. And then we will be hosting that data on our website for all residents to be able to see. I anticipate probably a lot of people going into the codes office like they do to ask about FEMA flood maps. I anticipate people having a lot of questions for them about the maps, how to use them, and how they might affect people's property. I can't keep talking, guys. So when the maps are ready, if you go to our website and go to our town and then navigate to environment, you'll see a box that says future flood risk study. I think we can probably link it to the code office website or in the new items notices part. But we really want people to be able to use, all residents to be able to use this tool to make future planning decisions. You know, I anticipate you looking at it maybe before you buy a house or before you make capital investments on your, you know, I think Denise lives on a privately owned road, so maybe before her road association makes big improvements, maybe they'll look at how future flood risk will affect their property and their road and be able to make some better informed decisions.
Yeah, so I guess I should be able to, let me see if I can share screens real quick. So I tried to pull up, I was just gonna pull up all the milestone memo presentations that we had and just kind of run through them more briefly. I just realized our first one seems to be missing, but I can talk to the project and kind of explain what we did building off of the FEMA study, and then talk about some of the findings of how we kind of expanded that original study, and then how we've built this tool looking into kind of the future and future hazards for Harpswell. So I'm just going to share my screen here. I think that should be working. So I'm just gonna, I'll kind of quickly run through the background of this project, but essentially the kind of original idea for this was to build off of the big push that we had done in terms of putting together the York and Cumberland County FEMA appeals. So these were the 2017 preliminary maps that FEMA had come up with. And myself and my colleague Nate Dill back at Ransom Consulting had appealed the maps with several different towns in southern Maine. It was really a lot of data that we analyzed and also put together in terms of in order to kind of better understand the present day risk. So that was the current, future 100-year storm scenario. And with that, we did a full understanding of the risk from extratropical storms. So those are our like nor'easter storms, and then potential risk for hurricanes, which Maine and the Gulf of Maine has never really been impacted by a hurricane, but also looking in terms of like determining the flood risk, you need to also consider the potential for hurricanes to hit. And we did that study, and kind of out of that study was a whole bunch of usable data, but it really is just looking at the present day. And if you want to look into the future, it's always good to consider sea level rise on top of that. So our approach with this project was to take that study, which had been done looking at storms that had occurred up to, I believe, 2015, and in light of the storms that had occurred in 2024, we kind of wanted to bolster the data in there, look at the more recent storms and see if, have those recent storms impacted the present day flood risk. And then when we look at sea level rise on top of that, can we kind of use that to get a good understanding of future flood risk? So the first step of the study was to look through all the storm events that have occurred since 2015. We identified 4 storm events, and I'm plotting them here, have a figure of them here. There was a storm in January 2018, a December 2022 storm, and then those 2 January 2024 storm events that occurred kind of within the same week. What we did was took those 4 storms and we added the flooding statistics and the wave statistics or I guess the peak flooding conditions and peak wave conditions that we were able to simulate from those 4 storms, and we added those to the set of storms that we had analyzed for the York and Cumberland County FEMA appeals. So we took, I think that original study had 50 storms 50, and so we added 4 more. So we added those storms. In addition to that, the model that was developed for that, the York and Cumberland County study, was using old LiDAR data. So I think back when that study was done in 2017, there was only one LiDAR data set for the town of Harpswell. Other communities in southern Maine had a lot better data, but Harpswell had huge gaps of data missing, basically between high tide and low tide, where we started to get data from, I guess, like bathy surveys. So that kind of intertidal range was missing from the original data set, and there was nothing that could really be done about it without flying a town-wide LiDAR survey at the time. But before we added those storms to this data set, we also updated the grid, or the surface that we used to determine whether, or the surface that we used to analyze the wave conditions and the water surface elevation around town.
Scott, why is having the correct LiDAR important?
Yeah, so especially near shore, there are a lot of offshore reefs and like rock formations, small islands, and the bound, or the bottom impacts the wave conditions near shore. So the old version of the grid may not have had those offshore reefs and may not have had the bottom perfectly correct, where when the waves were coming towards shore, they might not have caused the correct wave breaking. We could have been under or overestimating the wave conditions. And there was really not a way of knowing whether they were perfect. I mean, they still, it's hard to know, I guess, without having like an observation on the shore during a storm and completely validating the model, whether it's perfect. But now we know that the nearshore conditions are more correct. So we updated that one, or I guess we updated the surface that was used for the study, and then we also, let me go back here, hold on. We also updated the storm set, but following that, we were, let me pull this up. Second one. So here's some of the results of running those 4 storm events. So when we input those into the AdCirc model grid, and reran the offshore water levels and wave conditions. We were able to compare them to observed conditions at the Portland tide gauge, and so that was the January 2018 storm. This was the December 2022 storm. This was the January 2024 storm, and then that was the second January 2024 storm. And you can see the peak water levels in the bottom of the screen here. The model is shown with the blue line, and then the dashed lines are what were observed at the Portland tide gauge. And so, yeah, okay, so in the original FEMA study, there were 40 storm events that were simulated. And then with the updated storm set, we looked at 44 storms. One other thing, looking at the kind of record length. So originally, the first storm that was simulated was, I think it was 1939 or 1940, and then the latest one was like 2015. And so by adding those storms, looking all the way up to the present day, we were able to extend the record by 14 years. And what that does is essentially improve your confidence on the storm statistics. So like the hazard levels that are predicted. And so if you look at I guess the important thing that comes out of this is the 10-year, 50-year, and 100-year total water level, which is the peak water level that the model predicted. These values are averaged around, I think we took like 20 points in Harpswell just to kind of compare those data sets. What is it? Yeah, if you look and compare the original FEMA study to the updated one, you can see the 10-year water level came up by about 0.4 of a foot. The 50-year water level came up by more than 1/2 of a foot, and then the 100-year water level came up by about 0.3 of a foot. So what you kind of see from this is it impacted the 100-year and the 10-year water level, but those storms that were all added were significant enough where they impacted that like medium return period storm event. So the like 50-year water level, the model is more confident that that's going to be more severe than what we had originally thought with that past study. So these figures show the wave height statistics throughout the town of Harpswell. So these are showing the 10-year wave height statistics, the 50-year, and then 100-year, and what is the? Yeah, I think that. Okay, so the right figures are showing the values without sea level rise, and then the left figures are showing with sea level rise. So we've also reran some of those storms with 8 feet of sea level rise to understand how, when you add more water, how does the wave hazard change in near the shore. So really what's happening is when the water level increases, the reefs and offshore bathymetry that could impact the waves and reduce the waves are submerged, and so the waves travel over those, and then they reach the shoreline with more energy. And so here are the 25 data points that we used to compare all the values. And then kind of a summary table comparing the FEMA statistics. So that's like, what is the present year, 10-year, 50-year, and 100-year water levels. The updated statistics, so that's after we did our study, how are those same levels changing, and then the difference between those. And so, sorry, the sharing thing's in my way, so it's hard to see on my screen. So in general, we're seeing pretty much like a 5% increase in water elevation. for the 10-year storm, and then a 4% increase for the 100-year, but then for the 50-year, there's like a 6 to 7% increase in water level. And then when you look at the wave conditions, it changes pretty significantly. So, and we're looking at the same thing here. So we're looking at the FEMA statistics compared to the updated statistics. Actually, for the wave conditions, we saw the addition of those 4 storms were not significant. But, sorry, I wanted to go to, oh, I don't have the,
It could,
oh,
I think those data points are interesting, the 25.
and then after we updated the statistics, we also are looking at the wave run up near the shoreline. So this is kind of the like one of the key parts of this study that we kind of looked into was since we know Harpswell is such a steep shoreline, the primary hazard is not necessarily the waves near shore or the flooding depth. It's what are the waves doing when they hit the shoreline. So are they running up and essentially just going up the slope and returning, or is there a structure there that they might hit with energy as they run up the shoreline? And so what we ended up doing is selecting around 2,500 transects around the shoreline of the town. And we drew these by looking at the elevation of the shoreline at kind of a regular interval. So if you look at the bottom right of the screen here, what's going on is those points are kind of guiding us. Okay, these are every 50 feet along the shoreline, and we're actually clicking all the the locations of where these calculations should be done. We had tried to initially automate this process, but we realized with how much the shoreline changes, when you automate a process that's drawing a whole bunch of lines that are used for calculations, that they might end up with, the transects are drawn in the wrong direction, or they aren't necessarily representative of that section of shoreline. So by having users going in and clicking all the points and kind of drawing those transects based on how they think the shoreline looks there, you end up with a better result. So yeah, I ended up clicking 5,000 times to make all those lines.
will you explain what a transect is?
Yeah, so I'll go into that. I can go into that a little further on the next slides, but in general, it's essentially a slice of the shoreline. So the statistics for the water elevation and the wave conditions and the flooding that we use for the input for this are in 2 dimensions. So it's throughout town, it's in 2 dimensions, but the resolution isn't very high. So those are, one point might be every 300 feet or so. But when you're trying to look at high level detail near the shoreline, you really want to be looking at like every 2 to 4 feet, especially when you have a shoreline that varies as much as the shoreline does here. And so what we did is we take the data just offshore, and then we essentially cut a slice of the shoreline and take 1 foot elevation increments, and then we use that to perform like near shore high resolution calculations. So we take 2 dimensions and go back to 1 dimension. And then for the final mapping products, we turn it back into 2 dimensions in order to visualize the data. And so here, I'm just going to jump out of here real quick and go into this. Sorry for so many different slides here. And so, back at this. So I guess what does the final product look like? Essentially what we put together were 9 different maps. The 9 maps have the 10-year, 50-year, and 100-year return periods on 3 different sea level rise scenarios. So each sea level rise scenario, we have 3 maps. So there's the 0 feet of sea level rise, which is essentially the present day scenario, and we have 3 different return periods on that. And then we have the 4 feet of sea level rise scenario with 3 different storms on that. And same thing for 8. So just kind of to explain the different scenarios, the ARI, or annual recurrence interval, are those like 10, 50, 100-year scenarios. And those are kind of the expected time between those events. So a 10-year storm is a storm you would expect to have every 10 years. That doesn't mean it's going to happen every 10 years. You can have 4 10-year storms in 1 year. Same with the 50 and 100-year. The 50-year return period storm is something you would expect there to be around 50 years between. But as we saw in 2024, there were multiple storms between the 50 and 100-year storm that happened within 1 week. So that's kind of explaining what the ARI is. And then also for sea level rise, one of the reasons we chose different feet of sea level rise instead of choosing the 2050 intermediate scenario is the NOAA sea level rise projections change all the time, so they might update those projections, and in 10 years they might say that in 2050 we're expecting 2 feet of sea level rise versus 3 feet. And by looking at the maps in specific elevations or heights of sea level rise instead of just scenarios, we can these maps can be they can still be valuable if those projections change. Here, I'm going to jump back here just to kind of explain how the transit calculations were done, and then I'll go back to the other slide and explain what the final map layers look like. So once we have those different flood scenarios, what we do to map the hazards is essentially calculate the wave conditions along the shoreline and also the wave run-up. So at each of these transects along the shoreline, we've calculated the 2% wave run-up, which is essentially the same value that FEMA uses to determine their hazard layer for their maps. And so we map that run-up elevation, and then we also assign some kind of automated methods for kind of post-processing the results. And so if you look at this figure, it's a little bit hard to see, but the this shoreline here, this slope corresponds to this transect, which is on Bailey Island, kind of near Giant Steps or Giant Stairs. And if you look, it's a very steep shoreline, and in the program that we ran to calculate the wave run-up, it calculated a run-up height of 15 meters, so that's like 45 feet. That's pretty significant. If you were to calculate this in a FEMA study, you wouldn't just take that 45 feet and go all the way to the 45-foot elevation. What you would do is you look at the 45-foot run-up and you look at the shoreline. If the shoreline is super steep and then it tapers off, FEMA has some mapping guidelines where they essentially say to stop the wave run-up at the shoreline, or at that peak of the shoreline, and extend it a certain distance, and then limit the wave run-up at that height. So it's ensuring that it's properly kind of shown, because the waves are hitting the shoreline, and what we're trying to represent is essentially the wave splash hazard, right? They'll run up and they'll splash, and they might have energy for a certain distance, but past that, it's really just wave spray. And so we've implemented that same kind of approach here, and through some iterative processes, comparing the 100-year scenario to the FEMA maps, we were able to get the these maps to line up as closely as we could to the FEMA flood maps. And I'll go back up here. So I'm going to kind of describe the different flood hazards that we have in here. Oh, do you think you could close that so I can? Yeah. So there's essentially 3 different layers for the 2-dimensional maps. The static flood depth, which represents the depth of water over ground. This isn't the moving water. So this is essentially where does the water, the average water level reach during the peak of a storm. So what's the highest or the deepest that we would expect a flood to inundate an area during a storm. These are shown in 1-foot increments. So you could see 0 to 1 feet, 1 to 2 feet, ranging up to 10 feet deep. Anything below 10 feet deep, we've just shaded as 10 feet deep. So we've assumed if you're more than 10 feet underwater, it probably isn't any additional info needed. So you're pretty flooded. In terms of the run-up hazard, we classified this based on some kind of guidance, comparing it to the FEMA guidance. So the minimal and moderate wave run-up, this might be wave splash, or the waves have enough, or the run-up might have enough energy to move some things around. Maybe anything in that area would get wet, probably, but wouldn't necessarily be damaged. Once you're looking at the high and severe areas for the run-up hazard, those are areas where you could expect to see some damage. And those roughly align with what FEMA would classify as a V zone or VE zone. And then the wave height map also is shown over everywhere over water, so you can see anywhere that's flooded. We also have wave condition data, so you can, if you had a dock or some sort of in-water structure that you wanted to look at what wave conditions might occur, then you can look at that wave height map. Yeah, I'm gonna just pull up my viewer here and kind of generally explain some of these maps. So right now, I've just pulled up the 100-year flood map, or the 100-year return period. I'm showing the run-up depth and the static flood depth here. And I'm just going to zoom in, or I'm going to toggle on and off the FEMA flood map just so you can see how that compares to this. So if I turn that on, I should move that here. And what I'll do too is I'm going to turn off the aerial just so you can see. So right here is the extent of the FEMA flood map. So you can, if you look at the black line, that shows the extent of the flood map, and then also the purple layers and then the blue layers are showing where we've mapped to be a hazard. So you'll see some areas we've over-predicted the FEMA flood map, but we're really trying not to under-predict. So some areas it is slightly off, but for the most part it should pretty much line up with the 100-year FEMA flood map. And so I guess right now I'm zooming into Bailey Island, which, as you all know, is very exposed to the ocean. So anywhere, especially on the east side here, is going to have really high wave energy. And so you see lots of this purple zone showing high run-up hazard. The shoreline is very steep, so you're not going to see a lot of variation in this static flood depth layer. It's all going to look very blue here. But if we look over this other side, can one of you remind me this cove, the name of this cove here? Mackerel Cove, that's right, that's right. So if you look at Mackerel Cove, you can see this area near the beach is slightly underwater. You can also see there's some, we've shown some run-up hazard here, and that kind of lines up with the, if we turn off the FEMA flood map, it's very close to the FEMA flood map there. But you can see the depth of the water, and you can also see the areas with the highest run-up hazard. Let's see, I'm going to go up towards the bridge, and I'll turn the aerial back on so you can see below it too. But yeah, you can see the water level for the 100-year scenario is right up near where like Cook's Lobster is. The end of the point here is not underwater, but it is within the run-up hazard. So there's, like a moderate run-up hazard there. Let's see. But then when you come to this side of the bridge, you can see almost everywhere has higher run-up hazard and is a steeper shoreline. So there's less of that like minor inundation depth. But I'm gonna do, I'm also gonna pull up on the side the, what is it? Change that. And so here I'll pull up all the maps. Might take me a minute to pull some of these up. But I'll generally just show what the 10-year flood might look like for the present day, and then compare that to some of the future scenarios. Actually, Catcher, do you think, I was trying to find the online version, but I couldn't. Do you think you could try and pull it up here?
Yeah, did you get my email?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Sorry, I sent links that
Okay.
I'm not 100% confident would work, but
Yeah, let's try that.
try that first, and then otherwise I can bring my computer up.
Okay.
I don't know, it was a little,
Okay, I'll try one of these.
no, okay. Sorry, it was not immediately clear to me how one would share WebNet's link, which is kind of bizarre, but I can bring that up.
I'll try a few of these just in case. Oh, wait. No, this one worked.
Okay.
All right, let's try that. All right, this is a good one. This is the 0-100 year. And here, I'll close this and hopefully. So this is the layer we were just looking at on my ARC map, but this is how the online version should look. It's essentially the same data, but you can also see the transects are all here, and what I don't have.
We've heard that.
Yeah.
before.
That was weird. I've had my sound on this whole time, and that was the first time that pulled up. And so we have a summary table showing all the data at that one point. So if you click at any of the ends of these transects, you can see a summary that shows the wave height, the water level, wave setup, and then the 2% run up for all of the map scenarios. So if you don't want to have to toggle through every single one of the maps, and you're just interested in, what is my flood hazard at my property or near my property, then you can click on this, and then use the data from this map, or from this table to make decisions, rather than having to like toggle through all the different maps. Let's see, try a different one. So Catcher, are these, so right now we don't have a different, like, layers that you can toggle in the map viewer, right?
I believe you should be able to toggle them on and off in there.
Okay,
That was when I sent you that particular version, but, let's see. Go to layers, actually, which is up here,
yeah.
and then the eye icon, well, the other side, this eye icon.
Okay. Okay, so you can turn off the individual layers,
Yeah.
but not, like, switch between the scenarios on the
No,
map?
no,
Yeah,
no.
okay. All right.
Hey Scott, I just want to confirm your audio is not connected.
You can't hear me?
No, on yours, on Zoom.
Oh,
Did you connect your audio?
no, I'm off, yeah. So I'll pull these up side by side, but these are, on this side is so the right side is our 8 feet of sea level rise, 100-year storm scenario. And then on the left is the present day 100-year storm scenario. So you can see the difference in the flooded areas, but also compare the run-up hazard with the current hazard. So just looking side by side. And I also thought this area was interesting to look at. This was near, Long Point Road. So at the end of Long Point Road, if you look at the current 100-year flood hazard, you can see, for the most point, the point is not underwater, but it's all within kind of high run-up hazard area. So you would expect during 100-year storm to see pretty severe wave run-up or wave splash. But if you look at with 8 feet of sea level rise, essentially the entire point is underwater. It's also can be, these maps are great to look at some of the roads, so you can see, how deep below water they might be during a storm scenario like present day, and then also comparing to future. I'm gonna pull up the 4-year one too, because let's see the 4-year 10 scenario. I'm sorry, I said 4-year 10, but it's the 10-year ARI with 4 feet of sea level rise, 4 feet of sea level rise. And so if you compare that to the present day 100-year scenario, you actually see it's probably more severe flooding than you would see during the present day 100-year scenario. And you compare out of the point 2. Is there anywhere anyone would want to look just to do a comparison?
Yeah. Go over the basin,
Where?
the basin, on 123.
Okay. Basin Cove. Is that,
To the left, to the left and at the bottom.
Between Ash Point and Basin Hole.
okay.
Zero on Christie's house.
Here?
Right there, yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, so again, the left one is the present day 100-year flooding scenario. And then the right is the 4 feet of sea level rise, 10-year return period scenario.
Back to where it was originally years ago.
And so you see there's, in the cove, there's not a large amount of run-up hazard just because it's very sheltered still and that, that's not going to change. But then as you start to go out to the exposed points, you see that run-up hazard area expands. One thing you'll see too is when you start to compare the lower return period scenarios with higher sea level rise to the current higher return period scenarios, you'll see that the more exposed points actually have higher run-up hazard, and that's just due to the higher wave hazard. And so you'll see like at the more exposed points, the higher risk is still going to be during that higher severity event. But then as you start to go into the more sheltered areas, you start to see a larger impact from higher sea levels.
Hey, Scott, I'm gonna have to stop you in 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, of course.
We've got a hard stop at 6.
Yep.
So,
So maybe we could open it up to any
Yeah,
questions?
Good.
I think one question we got at the non-resident taxpayer meeting is where you're measuring zero from. So it's 0 feet of sea level rise.
Yeah.
When is that?
So zero, I guess in terms of sea level rise, zero is measured from essentially the present day scenario, right? So we're comparing it to the current water levels or current mean water level. But if you're looking at the
Current being 2026?
I think it's based off of the current tidal epoch, which is
Okay.
centered on 2015, I believe.
Okay.
But I think it's 2015 to 2026 is like a tenth of a foot maybe of sea level rise has been observed. So it's,
Right.
yeah. And then in terms of, I think everything else, if you click on these save points, the value, here, I'm gonna expand this so we can see it a little better. But the numbers in these, the elevations are all NAVD 88. So they're in feet NAVD 88, and we've tried to label everything in here. So
Which is consistent with the FEMA flood map.
same as the FEMA flood map, same as like if you had a property survey done, it would be NAVD 88. So the only thing it's not necessarily easily converted to is mean low water, which you would see on like a nautical chart. Yeah.
Do you guys have any questions, Matt?
When you figure out the wave run up, are you figuring it out for like worst case scenario type of thing? Like
Yeah.
assuming a storm would be coming from the worst case scenario, and do you figure like we're starting to see storms more frequently come out of the southeast? And does that figure into it the direction that like when you added in the new storms, a lot of those were southeastern blows. Does that change the model,
Yeah. So
and reduce the risk, say, to the western shore?
I guess in terms of looking at it's hard to kind of explain the like how the statistics break down, but it's really what you'd expect to see in each location of the map for like once every 10 years or once every 50 years or once every 100 years. Because what we're doing is we're looking at a whole bunch of different scenarios, and then we're essentially adding them all up and then comparing them everywhere. Because if you look at if you did it differently and you tried to design like the perfect 100-year storm for one location in Harpswell, an area that's exposed to, that might be a southeaster blow, But then if you have a nor'easter that has east wind and northeast wind, a totally different area in town might
Right.
have a different flood scenario. So this essentially removes that individual storm and breaks it more so down to like
Worst case.
worst
scenario.
case scenario for each location.
All right.
All right, are we good?
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Scott.